The iron gate of the Double Creek Ranch felt like ice against My Lin's trembling palm. Behind her, miles of unforgiving, snow-covered road stretched back toward the town of Silver Creek, a settlement that had made its judgment of her painfully clear. 3 days ago, the boarding house owner's voice had echoed with a finality that cut deeper than the wind. "I run a respectable establishment," the woman had sneered, looking down her nose at My Lin. "I don't want your kind taking up space here. Find somewhere else." My Lin had tried everywhere else. The laundry, the saloon, even the livery stables. No one would hire a lone Chinese woman, let alone give her a room. Now, only this desolate ranch remained. She lifted her worn canvas bag, the weight of it somehow heavier than when she had fled the railroad camp weeks ago. The ranch spread out before her, vast and white under the slate-gray December sky. Smoke curled invitingly from a distant stone chimney, and lamplight already glowed in the windows, though sunset was still an hour away. It was the kind of warmth she had been denied for longer than she cared to count. Her fingers, stiff with cold, fumbled with the gate latch. It refused to budge, frozen solid by the severe winter drop. "You're lost, miss." My Lin spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A ranch hand stood 20 feet away, his heavy coat dusted with fresh snow, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Her voice came out smaller than she intended, swallowed by the howling wind. She straightened her spine, smoothing the front of her beige traditional cheongsam. The silk was stained at the hem and far too thin for this weather, but it was the only piece of her heritage she had left. "I heard you have a calf in trouble. I can nurse animals. I have done it before." The man scoffed, spitting tobacco into the snow. "This ranch ain't a refuge for strays, and it certainly ain't a place for a woman like you." His tone wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact, which somehow made it worse. "I do not need charity, sir," My Lin said, her voice gaining a steely edge. "I need work." He studied her for a long moment, taking in the beige silk flapping in the wind, the worn boots, and the desperation in her dark eyes. Whatever he saw must have been enough, because he jerked his chin toward the barn. "Follow me. Stay close. The storm is coming in hard." They walked in silence through the deepening snow. My Lin's boots were not made for a Wyoming winter, and the cold seeped through the leather, biting at her toes. She kept pace, clutching her bag against her chest to shield herself from the wind. The barn doors swung open, and the scent of hay, leather, and animal warmth rushed out to meet her, a smell better than any perfume she had ever known. Lantern light spilled across straw and shadows. In the corner, wrapped in rough wool blankets, lay a tiny calf. Its sides heaved with labored breathing, and its eyes held the dull glaze of a creature giving up. My Lin's fear dissolved instantly. She set down her bag and knelt, her hands moving with professional certainty. She placed a hand on the animal's neck, checking its pulse. "How long has she been like this?" "Born yesterday," the hand grunted. "Mother died birthing her. We figured the baby would follow soon enough." "Not if we do not let her," My Lin whispered. She looked up at the man. "I will need warm milk, clean cloths, and a place to sleep nearby. This one needs feeding every 2 hours." The ranch hand hesitated, then disappeared toward the house. My Lin removed her threadbare coat, revealing the full length of her beige cheongsam, and wrapped the coat around the calf, pulling the animal close to her own body. Body heat was the priority, everything else could follow. She whispered into the calf's soft ear. "You and I both, little one. Nobody wanted us today. But we are still here." Through the gaps in the barn walls, the ranch house glowed like a promise she didn't dare believe in. She worked by lantern light, her hand steady despite her exhaustion. The calf's temperature was critically low, its breathing shallow. Premature birth, she guessed, combined with cold exposure. The odds were grim. But My Lin had learned long ago, surviving on the edges of the frontier, that grim was not the same as hopeless. She mixed the warm milk the hand had brought with a beaten egg, testing the temperature against her wrist. Too hot would burn, too cold would rob the calf of precious heat. When it felt right, she soaked a clean cloth and held it to the calf's mouth. The animal's tongue moved weakly, then stronger. Then, it began to suck. "That is it," My Lin murmured, stroking the velvet fur. "That is a good girl." Most folks would have given up by now. My Lin's hand jerked, nearly spilling the milk. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, weathered, perhaps in his early 40s. His shearling coat hung open despite the cold, and his eyes held the careful neutrality of someone who had learned not to hope too quickly. "Mr. Mercer?" My Lin tried to stand, but he waved her down. "Keep working." "I am just watching." He moved closer, the lamplight catching the silver threading through his dark hair. "Bo said you offered to help." "I have nursed premature livestock before," she said, returning her attention to the calf. It was easier than meeting his intense gaze. "My father kept animals. I learned to heal them. This one's strong enough to want to live." "That counts for something." Grant Mercer crouched beside her. His presence was solid, unhurried. "What does she need?" "Constant warmth. Feeding every 2 hours around the clock for the first 3 days. After that, every 3 hours for a week." My Lin kept her voice level, hiding her intimidation. "And someone who will not give up on her. And that someone is you. If you will allow it, sir." He was quiet for so long My Lin thought she had overstepped. Then he stood, the straw rustling beneath his boots. "Tack room is through that door. There is a cot and a stove. You can stay there tonight. We will see about tomorrow." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. "This one won't make it," he said quietly, almost to himself, looking at the calf. My Lin looked up then, meeting his eyes directly. "Not if we decide that before we try." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a softening of the hard lines around his mouth. He nodded once and left. My Lin arranged the blankets around the calf, then settled into the straw beside it. Her beige cheongsam was wrinkled and stained with mud, but she didn't care. Through the barn slats, the ranch house windows glowed gold against the blue evening. She could see a figure moving inside, Grant, probably sitting down to a solitary dinner. For the first time in weeks, My Lin felt almost useful. The calf's breathing steadied beneath her hand. Dawn found My Lin already awake. She had barely slept. Every 2 hours she had risen to warm more milk, to check the calf's temperature, to whisper encouragement into the darkness. Now, morning light filtered through gaps in the barn walls, turning dust motes into floating gold. The calf lifted its head when My Lin approached. A small movement, but more than yesterday. "Good morning," My Lin whispered. She prepared the feeding with practiced efficiency. "Look at you, getting stronger." The barn door creaked open. Grant entered carrying a tray, coffee, biscuits, and eggs. He set it on a hay bale near My Lin without comment. "Thank you." She accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around the mug. "You did not have to. You have been up all night with my calf. Least I can do is make sure you eat." He lingered, leaning against a support beam, watching her coax the animal to take more milk. His silence wasn't uncomfortable, just observant. Finally, he spoke. "You said you have done this before." "Where?" "My father worked on the railroad supply lines," My Lin said, keeping her eyes on the calf. "We traveled a lot. I helped with the pack animals. Difficult births, sickness. I seemed to have a knack for it." "What happened to him?" "The fever took him last winter," she said softly. The camp moved on. They had no use for a single woman without family. Grant's jaw tightened. "Fools." My Lin had no response to that. She had heard pity before, plenty of times. But the quiet anger in Grant's voice was something different. It felt like defense. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm. My Lin rarely left the barn except to fetch water or use the outhouse. Grant brought meals, simple but warm, always more than she could finish. Ranch hands came and went, their voices carrying across the yard. "Boss is soft," she heard Bo say one afternoon. "Letting her stay won't last once Christmas passes." He is just being Christian about it. My Lin pretended not to hear. She focused on the calf, who grew stronger with each passing day. By the third morning, the little creature stood on shaky legs, bleating for breakfast. There you are, My Lin laughed, tears pricking her eyes. There is my fighter. Grant appeared at dusk on the third day, December 23rd, Christmas Eve was tomorrow. You don't sleep much, he observed, leaning against the stall door. Neither does worry, sir. He smiled then, the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, erasing years of loneliness. Suppose you will want to head to town tomorrow for Christmas services. My Lin's hand stilled on the calf's back. Town. Where the landlady had turned her out. Where shopkeepers looked through her like she wasn't there. Where children pointed at her eyes and her dress. Her silence answered for her? Grant studied her with those careful eyes. Something shifted in his expression. A decision being made. Well then, he said, his voice rough. Reckon you will be here for Christmas. He left before she could respond. My Lin returned to brushing the calf, but her hands trembled. She told herself it was just exhaustion. But deep in her chest, something dangerously close to hope had begun to bloom. Grant Mercer stood at his kitchen window, watching My Lin cross the yard through the morning mist. She moved with purpose despite her obvious exhaustion, the beige silk of her cheongsam fluttering beneath her open coat. Even from here, he could see her lips moving, talking to the animal. She probably did that constantly, her voice a low murmur of encouragement and affection. It had been 5 years since this house had heard a woman's voice. 5 years since Catherine died, leaving him with a silence so profound it had become its own presence. He had thought he preferred it that way, simpler, safer. Then My Lin appeared at his gate with her carpet bag and desperate eyes, asking only for a chance to be useful. And somehow, in 3 days, she had reminded him what life sounded like when someone cared about something other than mere survival. The proper thing would be inviting her to Christmas dinner. But what would that mean? What would people say? The ranch hands already gossiped. If word reached town. Grant turned from the window, his jaw set. Since when did he care about town gossip? He grabbed his coat and headed for the barn. My Lin was singing when he entered, a traditional melody in her own language, the notes haunting and beautiful in the vast empty space. She sat in the straw, the calf dozing in her lap. Grant stopped in the doorway, unwilling to break the moment. Then she glanced up and saw him. The song died, and pink flooded her cheeks. I did not mean to disturb you, he said quickly. That was nice. My Lin gently moved the calf aside and stood, brushing straw from her skirt. Did you need something, Mr. Mercer? He had rehearsed this in the kitchen, but now the words tangled on his tongue. It is Christmas Eve. I thought. If you would be willing. Maybe you would join me for dinner tomorrow at the house. Her eyes went wide. I could not impose. You are not imposing. I am asking. He shifted his weight, feeling foolish. Been a long time since I had company for Christmas. Seems wrong, you being out here alone when there is a warm table inside. My Lin's hands twisted together. Fear, hope, and disbelief chased across her face. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Why? It was a fair question. Because watching her care for that calf reminded him what tenderness looked like. Because her laugh when the baby stood up was the first genuine joy he had heard in years. Because she deserved better than eating alone in a cold barn. Because it is Christmas, he said finally. And because that calf is not the only one who needed somewhere warm to be. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked away quickly, nodding. 4:00 tomorrow, then he turned to leave, then paused. There is a trunk in the guest room. My sister left some things last time she visited. You are welcome to anything that fits. He left before she could thank him. Before he could see if those were tears of gratitude or something else entirely. The bundle he had wrapped sat on the kitchen table, a thick woolen dress, deep burgundy, sturdy and warm. He had found it in the trunk, true, but he had chosen it specifically. He hadn't planned to ask her to dinner. But this morning, watching My Lin shiver in her thin silk, something in him had decided, tomorrow was Christmas. Nobody should be cold on Christmas. My Lin descended the stairs at 3:55 p.m., her heart hammering against her ribs. The burgundy dress fit reasonably well, though she had kept the high collar of her beige cheongsam visible underneath, a layer of silk against her skin to remind her of who she was. She had washed, pinned up her dark hair with a simple wooden stick, and stood before the small mirror in the guest room. The woman looking back wasn't beautiful in the way the town women were, but she wasn't invisible either. Grant waited at the bottom of the stairs. When he saw her, something passed across his face. Recognition, maybe. Or appreciation. Not pity. Never pity. You look, he cleared his throat. That color suits you. Thank you. For the dress. And for, she gestured vaguely at the house. All of this? Come on. Dinner is getting cold. The dining room glowed with lamplight and a crackling fire. The table was set simply but beautifully, good china, a centerpiece of pine boughs. Two places were set across from each other, not at opposite ends like strangers, but close enough for conversation. Grant served roasted chicken, potatoes, and carrots glazed with honey. Everything was warm, seasoned well, clearly made with care. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the pop of the fire and the clink of silverware. Tell me more about your father, Grant said finally. My Lin relaxed slightly. He was a quiet man. He taught me that animals do not care what language you speak or what you look like. They just care if you are gentle, and if you show up. Grant set down his fork. People should work the same way. But they don't. No, she said, looking down at her plate. They do not. That is their failing, My Lin. Not yours. My Lin's throat tightened. Do you believe people can change? Start over. I believe Christmas happened because everybody deserves another chance. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither quite dared to examine. After dinner, they walked to the barn to check the calf. The animal scrambled up at their approach, bleating enthusiastically. My Lin laughed and prepared a bottle, her movements easy in Grant's presence now. He stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You have given her a chance. That is worth something, Grant said. She gave me one too. In the lamplight, his hand brushed hers on the bottle. Neither pulled away immediately. The calf nursed, oblivious to the charged silence. Finally, Grant stepped back. I should let you rest. Early start tomorrow. My Lin nodded, not trusting her voice. At the barn door, he paused. My Lin. I am glad you came to my gate. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the calf and a heart too full of dangerous hope. The gossip reached Silver Creek by noon the day after Christmas. Bo, the ranch hand, mentioned it while picking up supplies at the general store. Just a casual comment, Boss had that Chinese woman at his table Christmas night. Mrs. Higgins, the store owner's wife, perked up immediately. Oh? The drifter who came through last week. That's the one. Boss is treating her like a guest. Silence rippled through the store. What is Grant Mercer thinking? Someone whispered. Charity is one thing, but Christmas dinner? At his table? With her? Poor man, Mrs. Higgins clucked. Too lonely for his own good. She will take advantage of him, mark my words. By afternoon, everyone knew. By evening, My Lin heard about it. Grant had sent her to town for lamp oil and thread. She had been nervous, but determined she couldn't hide on the ranch forever. The heavy coat Grant had lent her gave her courage. Maybe things would be different now. They weren't. My Lin stood at the counter, coins in hand, while Mrs. Higgins deliberately helped every other customer first. Finally, with exaggerated patience, the woman took My Lin's money. Behind My Lin, two voices rose, just loud enough to carry. throwing herself at him. Probably right there in his barn. It isn't right. A woman like that in a decent man's house. She is just looking for a handout. My Lin's hands trembled. She took her purchases and fled, the women's quiet laughter following her into the street. The ride back to the ranch blurred. Tears froze on her cheeks before she could wipe them away. By the time she reached the barn, her chest ached with humiliation. She began packing her canvas bag immediately. The calf was strong now, almost ready to join the other animals. Her job was finished. It was time to move on before she caused more trouble for the one man who had shown her kindness. What happened? My Lin spun. Grant stood in the doorway, his face tight with concern. I should go, she said, her voice cracking. The calf is well enough now. You do not need me anymore. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides. What did they say? The truth of My Lin couldn't meet his eyes. That I do not belong here. That I am. What exactly did they say, My Lin? The steel in his voice made her look up. His eyes burned with barely controlled anger, not at her, she realized, but for her. They said I was trying to trap you. That you were too kind to see it. I am causing you problems, Mr. Mercer. People talk. Your reputation. My reputation? Grant's jaw clenched. You are worried about my reputation. You have been nothing but good to me. I will not repay that by making your life harder. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was controlled but intense. I asked you to stay through New Year's. I don't go back on my word. But those people don't know you. They don't know what you did for that calf, or how hard you have worked. They see what they want to see. He gestured at her bag. You running away won't change that. It will just prove them right, that you were only here for what you could get. My Lin stared at him. And if I stay? Then you stay because I asked. Because I want you here. And to hell with what anyone else thinks. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was a refusal to let shame win. A quiet rebellion against small-minded cruelty. My Lin slowly set down her bag. The days between Christmas and New Year's stretched long and strange. An uneasy peace settled over the ranch. My Lin tended the now thriving calf and helped with other animals. Grant worked the land, but found reasons to stop by the barn, to check supplies, to bring coffee, to ask her opinion on a horse's injury. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. One evening, he taught her to mend tack, his hands guiding hers on the leather punch. Another night, she shared her knowledge of healing herbs, explaining how the dried roots in her bag could settle a fever. He listened like every word mattered. I thought if I stayed invisible, I would be safe, My Lin said quietly one night. They sat by the barn stove, snow falling softly outside. But invisible just meant alone. Grant stared into the fire. I built walls after Catherine died. Easier than risking that kind of pain again. He glanced at her. You have been quietly dismantling them. My Lin's breath caught. I did not mean to. I know. That is what scares me. The honesty hung between them, raw and vulnerable. On New Year's Eve, Grant appeared at the barn just after sunset. Town is having a gathering tomorrow. New Year's Day celebration. He spoke carefully. I am going. First time in 5 years. My Lin's hand stilled on the brush she had been using on the calf. I would like you to come with me. The words dropped like stones into still water. My Lin understood immediately what he was asking. Not just attendance at a party, but a public statement. An acknowledgement that she mattered to him. That town gossip wouldn't dictate his choices. They will talk, she whispered. They already do. It will be worse after. Maybe. He finally looked at her directly. But I am tired of living my life based on what other people think. Aren't you? My Lin thought of the landlady's cruelty, the whispers in the store, the years of being dismissed, overlooked, and judged before she could speak. And she thought of Grant's kindness, the dinner, his steady presence. "Yes," she said. "I am tired of it. So, will you come?" Every instinct screamed to refuse, to stay safe in the barn where no one could hurt her. But safety had kept her alone for so long. "Let me think on it." He nodded and left. My Lynn sat with the calf, stroking its soft coat. "What do I do, little one?" The animal nuzzled her hand, content and trusting. Sometimes, My Lynn realized, courage meant letting someone else stand with you, instead of always standing alone. New Year's Day dawned crisp and bright. My Lynn stared at her reflection in the guest room mirror. She wore the beige cheongsam, clean and pressed, with the thick woolen coat Grant had given her over it. She would not hide who she was, but she would accept his warmth. Grant waited by the wagon. When she stepped out onto the porch, he didn't say a word, but his eyes softened. He helped her up, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. They rode in silence. The 5 miles to Silver Creek felt like 50. The community hall glowed with lamplight and voices. Music spilled into the street. Through the windows, My Lynn could see people dancing. "We don't have to go in," Grant said quietly as he hitched the horse. My Lynn looked at him. This man who had offered her work when everyone else offered judgment. Who was willing to face down a whole town just to stand beside her? "Yes," she said. "We do." They entered together. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. The fiddle player faltered for a beat before recovering. Whispers spread like ripples across water. My Lynn's courage nearly failed, her grip on Grant's arm tightened. He patted her hand. "I am right here." Mrs. Higgins approached, false sweetness dripping from every word. "Mr. Mercer. We didn't expect company." Mrs. Higgins, his voice was pleasant but firm. "May I introduce Miss My Lynn? She has been invaluable to the ranch. Saved my best calf's life through Christmas week." "How?" "Charitable of you to give her work." The implication was clear, charity had nothing to do with it. Grant's eyes swept the room, making sure everyone heard. "Miss Lynn has more skill with animals than any veterinarian I have met. And more integrity than most people I know." Silence followed. Some faces showed shame. Others, grudging respect. A few remained hard with judgment. Then, something unexpected happened. Old Man Fletcher, a neighboring rancher, stepped forward. "Grant's right. I heard about that calf. My foreman said it was near dead. If she brought it back, that is genuine skill." He nodded to My Lynn. Slowly, carefully, the ice began to crack. Not everyone softened. Mrs. Higgins remained coldly polite, and several families kept their distance. But enough people extended genuine greetings that My Lynn could breathe again. Grant never left her side. When someone made a cutting remark just loud enough to hear, he responded calmly. Miss Lynn saved a life through dedicated, skilled care. I would say that makes her worth 10 of anyone measuring people by their skin or their clothes. Later, outside under the cold stars, Grant walked her to the wagon. "You didn't have to do that," My Lynn said softly. "Defend me like that." "Yes, I did." "For you." He paused. "And for me." My Lynn looked up at him. In the moonlight, his face was all plains and shadows, but his eyes were gentle. "Why me, Grant? Out of everyone. Why choose me?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because when you look at that calf, you see something worth saving. And when I look at you, I see the same thing." My Lynn's eyes filled. "I am not." "You are." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You are brave, and skilled, and kind. You sing to frightened animals and work through the night to save them. You are everything I didn't know I needed." "Grant. I know it is soon. I know people will talk. But My Lynn. I am asking anyway." His thumb brushed her cheek again. Stay. Not just through New Year's. Just stay. It wasn't a flowery proposal. There was no ring, no grand gesture. Just a rancher asking a woman to build a life with him, honest and plain. Mylin thought of the barn, the calf, the Christmas dinner. She thought of his steady presence and quiet respect. And she thought of how, for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen her. Yes, she whispered. He smiled, that rare, transforming smile. Then he kissed her, soft and careful under a sky full of stars. Late January sunlight streamed through the ranch house windows. Warm despite the lingering snow, Mylin woke in the bedroom that was becoming hers. Through the window, she could see Grant in the yard, the one sickly calf frolicking beside him like a puppy. Her calf. Their calf. Mylin dressed in her cheongsam, layering a warm cardigan over it, and descended to the kitchen. The coffee was already made. She began preparing breakfast, moving through the space like she belonged there. Because now, she did. Grant entered, stomping snow from his boots. His eyes found hers immediately. Morning. Morning. How is our girl? Growing like a weed. Thinks she is a dog. He poured coffee. Been meaning to talk to you about spring. Need to mend the south fence. Thought we might plant a kitchen garden, too. You mentioned knowing herbs. He was deliberately casual, but his eyes held intensity. Figure that will keep us busy through April. Us. Such a small word. Such enormous meaning. I would like that, Mylin said softly. They ate breakfast together, discussing plans. Practical, simple, ordinary plans that meant everything because they assumed a future. Shared space. Combined effort. Over coffee, Grant reached across the table and took her hand. Circuit preacher comes through in March, he spoke carefully. I was thinking. If you are willing. Maybe we could ask him to stay a day or two. Mylin's heart stuttered. Grant. I know it is fast. I know people will say things. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But I don't want to wait anymore. I have spent 5 years alone. Now I wake up and hear you singing in the kitchen, and I can't imagine going back to the silence. You are sure? Mylin searched his face. About me? Despite everything? I am sure about us, he said firmly. The rest is just noise. Mylin thought of all the places she had been turned away. All the voices that said she wasn't enough, would never be enough. And she thought of this man who had looked past surface judgments to see her heart. Then yes, she whispered. Yes. They walked to the barn together after breakfast. The calf ran to Mylin immediately, butting her hand for attention. Mylin laughed, the sound echoing in the crisp morning air. Grant wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Together, they watched the calf play, watched the sun climb higher, watched the snow begin its slow melt toward spring. Never thought I would get here again, Grant said quietly. After Catherine. Thought that door closed forever. Maybe it did. Mylin leaned into his warmth. Maybe this is a different door. He kissed the top of her head. A better one, I think. Mylin caught her reflection in the barn window, herself beside Grant, the beige silk of her dress visible beneath her coat, the calf at their feet. The ranch spread around them in the clear morning light. Not invisible anymore. Not alone. Just seen. Just valued. Just home. Home isn't a place, her father used to say. It is the folks you can be yourself with. Mylin finally understood. The calf bleated, demanding breakfast. Mylin prepared a bottle while Grant fetched fresh hay. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from knowing someone completely and being known in return. Outside, the Wyoming sky stretched blue and endless, full of promise. Inside the barn, two people who had thought they had lost their chances at happiness discovered they had been wrong. And between them, a rescued calf, no longer orphaned, no longer weak, stood as living proof that sometimes salvation works both ways. Sometimes the one who needs rescuing ends up saving someone else. Sometimes love arrives not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments: a gate opened in a storm, a seat at a Christmas table, and a hand that refuses to let go when the world says you are not worth holding on to. Grant's fingers found my lens. She squeezed back. Through the barn door, the morning light painted everything gold.